Greetings and salutations. It is I, Mr. Nothing, the museum curator of the weird and the strange and the host who might be a ghost. Welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all manner of unusual literature that I have found in my travels. So today it is Thursday, so I wanted to talk about Poetry Thursday. I wanted to specifically highlight a poem that I read recently that really reached out to me. If I may drop the facade of the strange for a moment, I would like to highlight a poem by a Black author. Not recently, there's been a lot of talk of Black Lives Matter and civil rights, which hasn't been recently. It's been going on since the 1600s, where African Americans have had a rough time, to say the least. They endured slavery, followed by segregation and Jim Crow, followed by racism that has been below the surface. So the Civil Rights Acts that were passed in the 50s and 60s did a lot to help, but they didn't solve all the problems. And so people of color have had to endure police brutality and food insecurity and problems with housing and a whole bunch of other issues that maybe white people like me haven't had to endure. So I wanted to share a poem that I found in order to amplify black voice. That poem is called A Fable by Etheridge Knight. I picked Etheridge Knight because I could have gone with the usual Maya Angelou or Langston Hughes. But I felt that I wouldn't have been challenged in that way because I'm familiar with their work. I wanted to go out and find a Black author that I had never heard of before, and I think that's what I did here. Etheridge Knight was a Black man who served in the Korean War, and after the Korean War, like many GIs, he fell into drug addiction and poverty, and he found himself in a rough point in his life. He ended up going to prison for violence, for robbery, I think it was, which is unfortunate. And while in jail, he read about Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and other civil rights leaders at the time, and he just said, I like these people, I respect them. So he decided to amplify their voices while in jail. And in jail, he wrote poetry. He published a couple books on poetry. He published a couple anthologies on the civil rights movement. So that work is largely found to have amplified the movement as a whole. And he kept publishing until his death. Once he got out of jail, he kept publishing until his death in 1991, I think it is. So he was a very interesting person, and I found the poem that I found for today was particularly interesting too, and how it's written and its underlying meaning. So I thought I would share that with you today. So without further ado, A Fable. Once upon a today and yesterday and nevermore, there were 7 men and women all locked up in prison cells. Now these 7 men and women were innocent of any crimes. They were in prison because their skins were black. Day after day, the prisoners paced their cells, pining for freedom, and the non-black jailers would laugh at the prisoners and beat them with sticks and throw their food on the floor. Finally, prisoner number 1 said, "I will educate myself and emulate the non-colored people. That is the way to freedom. Come on, you guys, and follow me." "Hell no," said prisoner number 2. "The only way to get free is to pray to my God, and he will deliver you like he delivered Daniel from the lion's den. So unite and follow me." "Bullshit," said prisoner number 3. "The only way out is through this tunnel I've been quietly digging, so come on and follow me." Said prisoner number 4. "That's too risky. The only right way is to follow all the rules and don't make the non-colored people angry. So come on, brothers and sisters, and unite behind me." "Fuck you," said prisoner number 5. "The only way out is to shoot our way out. If all of you get together behind me." "No," said prisoner number 6. "All of you are incorrect. You have not analyzed the political situation by my scientific method and historical mimi-jibi. All we have to do is wait long enough and the bars will bend from their own inner rot. That is the only way." "Are all of you crazy?" cried prisoner number 7. "I'll get out by myself by riding on the rest of you to the non-colored people. That is the way. That is the only way." "No, no," they all cried. "Come and follow me. I have the way, the only way to freedom." And so they argued, and to this day they are still arguing. And to this day they are still in their prison cells, their stomachs trembling with fear. So yeah, that was A Fable by Etheridge Knight. I really enjoyed that poem. I enjoyed reading it and being able to amplify Etheridge's voice. In terms of analysis, I don't want to say much because I'm just amplifying the voice at this point. In terms, I really like how the poem is written. It's written in verse style rather than in line by line by line form. So it's kind of in a giant paragraph chunk, which I find interesting. I don't see a lot of poems that are written in that way. It's almost like a song in a lot of ways. Yeah, so it's written in that kind of unusual way that really stood out to me. Another important thing to note is how the struggle of the prisoners is parallel to the struggle of the civil rights movement. By this point in 1986, most of the original civil rights leaders were dead by assassination, in jail, or had been silenced in some way. So I sense Etheridge's frustration in this poem, how maybe he's reflecting on how he thinks not much was accomplished by the civil rights movement, and how the various leaders just kept arguing and arguing, and they never dealt with the fact that the white jailers were abusing them, and they could only argue amongst themselves. And so I really feel the pain and frustration that Etheridge was getting at when he said that, it really seems like there was just arguments amongst themselves and no actual progress. And I think the main point to take away from this poem is that we can't be arguing amongst ourselves when how to determine the way forward for progress. We have to keep our eyes on the prize and remember who the true enemy is. In terms of, in this poem it's the white jailers, but in our reality it's the system, the politicians who refuse to actually address racial issues or systemic inequality. It's the judges, it's the lawyers, it's the police officers. We have to remember that they're to blame, and I think Etheridge wants us to remember that even though we may argue amongst ourselves at times, we have to reach a decision. We have to find a point where we can say, enough is enough. We are going to address these people. We are not going to tolerate this inequality anymore. That's especially important on my part because I have to use my privilege to call attention to the true perpetrators of this systemic inequality. I have to work alongside those in the civil rights movements, alongside Black Lives Matter, to make sure that progress is made, that we address the roots of these problems. So that's all I wanted to say about A Fable by Etheridge Knight. I hope that by sharing this poem, I've helped to amplify a Black voice. And perhaps I maybe even have reached out to somebody who might not have been thinking about this before. Until then, keep fighting, keep protesting, keep speaking out. That's always important. And I bid you a good day in your weird and social justice-y travels.